Happy, wonderful, beautiful new year, my friends. Welcome back to a mega compilation of the best Karen stories I've read on this channel in 2022. Some of these stories are absolute favorites of mine and Stevo's. We've got Karens calling 911 over ridiculous things, stealing people's cars, houses, babies, wheelchairs, you name it. They're also attacking police, attacking dogs, hitting grandmas. This super duper entitled episode has it all. So if you guys have missed some stories over this year, the most entitled ones, trust me, are in this episode. I hope you enjoy today's stories, guys. And tomorrow myself and Stevo will be back, business as usual, with a juicy episode for you. Okay? So on this day I was on an airplane. And right when we landed, a Karen in the back unbuckled and darts to the front of the plane to get off first. She made no eye contact with anybody, and she felt that she was special. I'm talking about going from the very last seat on the plane, down the whole row, past first class, basically standing in the little kitchen thing in the front. All this time, the seatbelt sign was still on, and we were rolling down the runway. The flight crew had asked her to return to her seat until we reached the gate, but she wasn't even responding. She was ignoring them. Everyone was basically trying to just wait it out. It was a long flight, like 8 hours, and at this point we were exhausted anyway, and nobody said a word. Suddenly, the captain announced that we had a special guest on board, and he'll be coming up to greet after we were settled at the gate. Now, the Karen stood there awkwardly until we did this whole rolling to the gates and whatever planes do when they land for about 15 to 20 minutes. Everybody sat there waiting to see what the captain was talking about. Eventually, the captain came out, and he asked the lady to please move back a little so he could get to a special guest. And then a little more, and then a little more, and then a little more. He was looking from row to row, trying to find a specific person. Everyone's watching and looking around to see who it could be. He kept going and going, asking the Karen to please step back a few more steps each time. Finally, as they approached the rear of the plane, he asked her to sit down for a second while he grabs the intercom at the rear of the plane. He then says out loud, "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to announce our special guest sitting in seat 42C. Let's give her a round of applause." And with that, the whole plane went wild with laughter and applause. I loved every moment of that. Absolutely brilliant, right? Guys, I once flew on a flight like that, where a loud group of people ran to the front to get off first. And the funniest thing happened. We ended up deplaning from the rear doors, not the front. That was incredible. So, the next story was submitted by a guy named Yash, and guys, it's such a crazy encounter with a Karen. Okay, so this story took place years ago, back in 2003. I was only 30 years old at the time, and I was at my local Walmart's after work one day. I had told this story to one of my co-workers, who suggested that I send you this email. Anyways, my wife had gotten me to stop by Walmart after work to pick up a few things for dinner. Now, I do want to note that on this day, I was working as a software engineer, so I was wearing jeans, dress shoes, a nice dark navy polo, and a lanyard around my neck with a work ID. So I guess I could have been mistaken for a manager of some sort. I don't know. Thinking back, I should have totally stuck that ID into my pocket. Now, back then I had no idea that these people were called Karens. To me, this was just a delusional woman who was off her meds. So, on one hot summer day in July, I guess I got to meet what you kids nowadays call a mega Karen, who happened to be completely bonkers. Stay with me. On this day, I was in the frozen food aisle looking for some frozen lasagna when out of the corner of my eye, a woman who looked to be in her 80s was in a wheelchair. She was trying to reach a frozen McCain cake on the middle shelf in the freezer. Now, I offered to help her, of course, as I wasn't going to turn away from an elder needing help. So I grabbed her the cake. She thanks me, and she goes on her way. I then grabbed my lasagna, and I was going to check out when all of a sudden I hear, "Hey, now that you're done helping her, come help me get this off the top shelf." Now, I do continue walking along, whistling to myself, when this woman screams, "Hey, I'm talking to you. Don't ignore me." At this point, I turn around to see an older woman, maybe in her mid-50s, standing there with her arms crossed, and she looks upset at me. I then look at her and say, "Excuse me." Karen says, "Yeah, I need help grabbing something off the top shelf." I tell her, "I'm sorry. You're asking the wrong person. I'm not an employee." She says, "Listen, I know you're the manager, and it's not your job to help people find things, but I saw you help that old lady, so you have to help me." Now, at this point, I'm thinking to myself, "Oh, she must think I'm the manager of the store by the way I dress." I then tell her, "Oh, you're mistaken. I'm not an employee of Walmart's. I'm just shopping like you are." The woman then begged me to go help her grab the item she wanted. Now, at this point, a lot of people might have walked off, but I'm about 6'5" and I decided, hey, why not? She's a short woman, so maybe I'll walk her to where it is, grab her whatever she wants from the top shelf, and then be on my way home. Quick and easy, right? Wrong. I follow Karen to the outdoor section, where she then proceeds to ask me to grab a huge box from the top shelf. She looks at me and says, "Okay, I need you to go get a ladder, or whatever you use to grab that box off the top shelf for me." I then say to her, Whoa, I'm so sorry. I thought I was helping you reach something higher up. I had no idea I need a ladder. You're gonna have to find an actual employee to do that." After I said this, something then flips in her brain, and she looks at me and says, "Well then, go get an effing ladder. How did you become a store manager if you're so stupid?" Now, when she said this, I immediately start walking away. I told her I'm not helping her, that I'm gonna pay for my lasagna and go home. I'm walking off while she's screaming insults at me that she's gonna call corporates and get me fired. At the time, I then made the mistake of saying, "Hey, I'm not an employee. Even if I was, you talking to me like this makes me not want to help you even more." The delusional Karen then says, "Listen, it's already bad enough that you're dark-skinned. I'm white, you have to help me. If you don't, I'll tell everybody what a racist you are for not helping a white woman, and I'm sure corporate would love to hear that." Now, I do want to note that 9/11 was still pretty fresh in everybody's minds in 2003, and I'm pretty sure she was referring to that. We're going in circles at this point, and I'm no longer listening to her, because why should I? She then says something I'll never forget. The woman literally points a finger in my face, gets really close, and with the creepiest dead smile on her face, she says, "If you don't help me, I'm gonna go to my car. I'm gonna grab my gun, and I'm gonna make you help me. You're lucky I don't have it on me right now, or you'd be in trouble." Okay. So she just threatened me, and I'm actually getting nervous at this point. I tell her, "Okay, I'm gonna go to the back. I'm gonna grab the ladder, ma'am. I'm gonna be right back." Now, I could have easily left the store, but I didn't want this crazy woman potentially harming some other innocent employee if her threats were true. I decide to go off and search for any employee right now. I end up finding one, and I ask him to call the real manager and maybe get security, as this woman was completely Looney Tunes. About 5 minutes later, the supervisor and Walmart security comes. I explained to them that there's a woman who just threatened to go to her car and grab her gun if I don't help her grab this box from the top shelf. The supervisor on shift's wondering if she should actually help the crazy woman grab the box to allow her to leave calmly, or just get security to escort her out. At this point, they figured helping her might be the best thing to do, just in case she was going to go through with the threats. But security mentioned that they didn't want to endanger any employees, just in case she is crazy, and their best course of action was to call police and let security handle it at this point. So I lead them back to her, and as soon as she sees security, this woman goes ballistic. She's screaming that they'll never get her out of the store, and that she'd rather die than let a brown-skinned idiot kick her out of Walmart. She then screams, "Ook, can't a white woman get some help from these effing immigrants anymore? If you don't help me, what good are you to the country? You don't belong in this country." Now, this happened so quick, but security actually went to grab her arm at this point to escort her out. But she wasn't giving up the fight. She ended up slapping and clawing the security guard, who was then left with no choice but to throw her to the ground. People were crowding around watching the woman fight and squirm, screaming every racist thing she could, and screaming that she's got a gun in her car and that everybody's dead. It took 2 security guards to get this woman under control. Security ended up pulling her out of the store as police rolled up to arrest her. The whole time, she was screaming at the police that they're white and they shouldn't be arresting her. I had to stay and give a police report while the woman was handcuffed and put in the back of the police cruiser. The whole time she was in the back of the cruiser, she was screaming that she didn't mean the things she said, and that she was sorry, and to just let her go home, and it'll never happen again. She then starts screaming about leaving the stove on at home, and that her house was gonna burn down if she doesn't go home now. We all assumed that this woman had some sort of mental disorder going on. I don't know what happened to her after that, and I'm assuming she got charged. Also, no idea if the cops ever searched her vehicle either, because I was told I could leave, and at the time the officers were going inside to look at the store cameras. To this day, I do wonder what happened to her. She's got to be in her 70s or even 80s by now. Guys, what a crazy wild story. And like Obi said, that woman might have been suffering from some sort of mental disorder. And she might have not even had a weapon in her car. What a terrifying threat to make to a stranger, though, and I'm glad nobody was harmed at the end. Okay, so for a little backstory, I live in a nice house. It's right on the beach, and I do take good care of it and my garden, so it's not strange to see people admiring my home when they're on walks. Also, I don't like driving, so I usually bike everywhere, and I do have a pool in my backyard. On to the story. So, I just had a long day at work and had a few groceries with me on my bike. As I pull into my street, I see a line of people blocking my driveway. Like full blocking. I pull onto the sidewalk and start walking my bike towards the group. Now, the people in the story are Karen and her 2 friends and her kids. The 3 of them are standing in a group, and I overhear a woman talking about how she's so happy for Karen and how beautiful her new home is. Now, I'm thinking that's odd. I don't recall any house around me being for sale or sold to anybody. So I try to pass the group of women to get to my garage. I say out loud, "Hey, can I get past, please?" Now, the Karen just says, "Go around, can't you see we're busy?" Now, at this I say, "Oh, just need to drop my bike in the garage, and then I'll be out of your way." I'm glad you like the house, though. I do try to take care of it. Now, at this point, friend number 1 says, I think you might be confused. Karen lives here." I say to the group, "No, this is my house. I live here." I don't know her at all. At this, Karen chimes in and says, "Okay, you're obviously trying to break into my house. Get away before I call the police." And I say to them, "No, you need to leave. This is my house." At this, Karen screams, "I will not get off my property." Now, at this point, I just push past and head towards the garage, and that's when I hear the splashing in my backyard. Now, nobody should be in my pool. I drop my bike, run to the backyard, and see 3 kids swimming in my swimming pool. Okay, I've had enough of whatever's going on. I raise my voice and I tell them to get out. 2 kids get out, but they're obviously confused, while 1 boy stays in. The kid that stays in says, "My mommy says I can swim, go away." I told him, "No, this is my pool. I'm so sorry, but you're not allowed to be here. This is my home." Now, Karen hears this, and she marches up to me and says, "Hey, don't talk to my son like that. Get off my property." Now, at this point, her 2 friends are looking confused, and she says, "Karen, what's going on? Who's this girl?" Now, I'm panicking at this point with a mix of rage, and I said, "Well, prove it. Prove that you live here." Karen's second friend starts to pull her away, and she says, "Hey, Karen, why don't we just go inside? The kids shouldn't be around this." Karen's friend then looks at me and says, "If I don't get off this property, they'll have no choice but to call the police." I said, "No, you're not going into my home." And Karen says, "Yes, we are. We're going inside now. Go away before I call the police." Now, I don't know what this woman's trying to do, but this is clearly not going to work. I then said to her, "Fine, go inside. I dare you to get in." At this point, Karen leads her group of friends away, and then the group climbs the stairs, and obviously she didn't think this through. Only 2 keys to this house exist. 1 key for me and 1 key from my sister. I can see and hear the women at my front door telling her friends that she must have grabbed the wrong key, and that they're locked outside. Now, I then lock up my bike, grab my groceries, and push past them saying, "Excuse me, if you don't mind. I'm going into my home." Her two friends look at me in disbelief as I unlock the door with my key, go inside, and shut the door. As I close the door and lock it, Karen's banging on my doors, screaming how she's gonna call the cops on me for breaking into her home. I ended up calling the cops on her. So, the group of women end up standing in my yard for a little while longer, while Karen was acting furious that someone was in her house. She then ran off as soon as she saw the cop cars, and the friends stayed behind very confused. They explained to the police that Karen had told them that this was her house, and that they were just gonna go swim in her new pool, and then head to the beach, so they would never go in the house. Later on, no charges are pressed, and I hope that Karen did learn her lesson. What an absolutely ridiculous story. Hey, fake it till you make it, right? And in this case, fake it until you get caught. That is just so embarrassing to think about, guys. She literally walked up to some random person's front door and tried to unlock it with a key that she knew wouldn't work. If I was that Karen, I would totally ghost at that point. I'd be dead from embarrassment. What do you even say to your two friends after that? "Oh, I lied. That's not my house. I was pretending." So, the morning after a good rowdy kickback in our apartment, my roommate and I go to the orange hardware store after noticing some holes in the walls. My roommate goes to find plaster, and I go find paint. I get to the paint department, and I'm looking through the paint swatches to remember what our walls look like. I then pick out a color that's probably the closest, and if not, I can just mix my own paint since I'm an art minor. There is no employee at the paint mixing station, so to kill some time before one comes along, I just put the swatch in my hoodie and then sort the paint swatches properly because mild OCD. And then it comes. I hear a hem. I turn around to see Karen, and she says, "Hey, I need you to do your job and mix me some paint." Now, at this, I stare blankly at her as my hangover is blocking my ability to respond. And she says, "Hello, I'm talking to you, mix my paint." Fortunately, my brain decides to turn on again, and I say, I don't work." I then get cut off by Karen, and she says, "I saw you sort that color wall. Were you about to say that you don't work here?" Only a lazy employee would say something like that, to not help customers. I told her, "Mom, I'm gonna be honest. I'm really hungover and your screeching is making me want to puke." Now, that statement went as well as you would expect. Karen sighs and says, "Oog, you've got to be kidding me. You are such a terrible worker. Do I need to find a manager and have you fired?" She then storms off. So, once she left, I hear chuckling down the aisle behind me. Lo and behold, my roommate listened to most of it, and he's laughing his ass off. He asked if I got the paint, and I explained the first part of the confrontation and told him I'm waiting on an employee to come back. We decide to wait for the manager because we know for sure she's going to be stomping back with one. Now, since my friend and I live for this kind of stuff, we think, hey, maybe he'll mix our paint before we're kicked out. So we wait a few more minutes, and George, an employee, walks up, oblivious to what just transpired. We tell him what we need, and he starts mixing our paint. A few minutes later, Karen arrives with the manager, and she says, "That's him. That's the one that called me an orangutan." He's so disrespectful. He needs to be fired right now, pointing at me. The manager then says, "George, wow. I'm frankly surprised you'd say such a nasty thing to a customer." At this, George says, What now?" Karen then says, No, not him. The scrawny one in that hoodie. He even told me he's drunk." Now, at this, the manager looks at me and he looks confused and says, "Mom, he doesn't work here, but I can ask him to leave for insulting you." Karen then says, "No, he definitely works here. I saw him working. He was sorting the color swatches." I then say to her, "Okay, well, consider today my last day then, I quit." She says, "You can't quit. I want you fired." By now, our paint's done mixing, and I asked George if he'd like to escort us to the front. I've never seen a morning shift employee brighten up so fast. Karen's being belligerent, and the manager tries to calm her down with coupons. My roommate, George, and I leave paint as fast as possible, and I can still hear her screeching from the cashier stand. I explained what really happened, and he laughed, and he says he'll tell the manager of the situation. Now, initially my roommate and I were gonna go straight home, but we had to see the outcome of this. We had time, so we showed George where we parked and where we were sitting, and he agreed to come back out once the orangutan was gone. The police ended up having to be called just to escort her out, but she wasn't arrested. Manager and George come out to the car, and as George had already explained what happened, the manager profusely apologized. We laughed it off, and I said something along the lines of it was worth getting out of bed for this despite the hangover. We were so kindly informed that Karen had come back later that day, and she had vandalized some of the art equipment that's always on display, and she was arrested. Serves her right. My goodness. Now, Karen, my biggest question is, why would you lie and insult yourself to that degree? Like, she literally could have said anything else, since she was just making up baloney. She could have said that the employee called her a big fat tree stump. But no, she chose to go with orangutan hidauhin. Like, what a creative insult. That was so. So, last fall we moved into a new house, and less than 2 weeks later we had a baby. We were pretty focused on the whole parenting thing, and we failed to notice how often the neighbor on one side was using our property for several things without any kind of permission or discussion. Now, it began when his kids spent their days on our driveway drawing with sidewalk chalk. We had to ask them to stop because we seriously feared running them over when backing out of the garage, as they have absolutely no supervision or regard for cars. They then stopped drawing, and then they started using our garage door as a bumper stop while riding their scooters and bikes. They physically bashed into my garage door and they dented it. I asked them to stop, and after a dozen or so instances, they finally stopped. In the spring, we noticed the dad was parking his trailer on our side of the property, between our two driveways. The property line is very clear with fences and different types of landscaping. In addition, he was pulling his garbage cans through our gravel and making huge tracks. So as we're in the middle of a pandemic and we have a baby, we decide to write a note and leave it with our information, while also aligning the property line with huge rocks. We never did hear from them. But they had moved the rocks into a pile and put them on the front of our property. We then moved the rocks back again and thought we had made our position very clear. At the beginning of June, the dad comes and rings our doorbell. He proceeded to tell us that he's parked his trailer like that since he's moved in, and no one has cared before, and we can't care either. At no point did he ask if he could park on our side of the property or use our property. He said to me, "It's never been a problem, and I should be able to do it." We then politely said that we did not give him permission to do so, and explained that we intended to landscape the area, and his trailer and use of our property would ruin the landscaping that we planned. The entire conversation was so difficult because he spoke over me the entire time, and he talked to me like a child. At the end of the confrontation, he said that we were rude neighbors and stormed off. Since then, he parks even further onto our side. He moves our landscaping rocks constantly, and he aggressively moves his garbage cans through our gravel, leaving marks, like he was zigzagging back and forth. So, this weekend, I started taking photos as proof of his parking and the way he's ruined our gravel with his garbage cans. He then came out and glared at me, and I very nicely again asked him to stop. He replied, "Why?" And when I said it's because it's my property, and we've asked him not to, he replied, "Whatever," and walked away. Now we come to today, and I'm done. I'm so frustrated that this guy feels like he's entitled to unquestioned use of property that's not his. I drafted a cease and desist letter with some legal assistance. Prior to sending it, I wanted to ensure that I had proper cameras in the event that he decided to make things worse. When I installed the camera, the neighbor must have realized why it was installed, because they stopped doing all the annoying stuff. Then about a month later, they listed their house for sale, they moved out, and we don't have to deal with their entitled attitude anymore. How entitled do you have to be to literally put your house up for sale and move away because you were told to stop using someone else's property? Like, wow. I do, however, feel bad for the new neighbors he's gonna have, though. Like living beside an entitled neighbor that has no respect for boundaries and personal property is the worst. And I seriously don't know how OP put up with that neighbor for as long as he did. Okay, so this story happened years ago, but I still remember it, because I still can't understand my mom's logic behind it. My mom has always been a super entitled brat and the golden child of her family. Anyways, my birthday party rolls around, and it was time to open presents. Me being my auntie, social self just wanted to get this party over with and to be left alone. I opened presents from my favorite auntie. She had gotten me some books on witchcraft history and on the occult because she knew I was really into learning about that kind of stuff back then. I then got the normal presents, I suppose, from my uncles and aunties, and also $20 here and there. Once I was done with what was on the table, I said thank you to every single person. I was trying to escape back to the garage with my dad when I was stopped by my mom as I went to leave, saying that I didn't open the presents from her yet. I sigh, thinking she's bought me another really girly thing to wear. Now, I want to note that she hates the way I dress, because I normally wear a lot of black, and I still do actually. So, I sit down on the couch, and she hands me 3 boxes, 1 small box, and 2 medium boxes. I unwrap the small one first, and lo and behold, she gets me a bottle of her favorite perfume. I then look at her like, "What the F, Mom?" And she says, "Oh, if you don't like it, I'll just keep it." I then unwrap the second present. It's new Nikes that are too big for me. But oh wait. Wouldn't you know it, they're my mother's size. I then sigh and hand them over to her without a word. She then starts loudly saying, "I've been meaning to get new gym shoes," to the whole room. So at this, my best friend looks at me, and she just rolls her eyes because she knows how my mother is. I then opened the last present, and this one was actually really nice. It was a brand new Discman, and yes, I'm really old. It was really nice. It had a strap for your hand to slide in so you can walk with it comfortably. I said, "Cool, thanks, Mom." And at this, my mom looks annoyed. I start to walk away with my Discman in hand, and she gets up and tells me, "Oh, I bought that for you so we can both use it. I'm gonna need it for the gym later, so can you put that in my room?" I told her, "I'm sorry, Mom, but I already gave you back your things, but this is mine. Thank you for buying yourself presents and pretending they're for me." I then walked to the garage with my friend laughing quietly. I tell my dad all about my mom's attempt at presents, and he just sighs and hands me a beer. My mom then comes outside yelling at me how I could embarrass her like that in front of her friends. She just stomps her foot and then looks at my dad for help. And Dad says, "So you bought yourself presents for her 16th birthday. Did you think she would be happy about that? She has a right to be upset. And you don't really have a leg to stand on here." My mom just huffed, and she stomped back in the house. And I spent the rest of the party with my dad and my friend in the garage. Heck, I hope Sophie got to keep the Discman, right? The mom just sounds over the top ridiculous though. Yeah, let's just buy things that I want for my daughter's birthday. So OP did come into the comments and say that her parents were divorced, and at the time she was living with Dad, and I can see why. It seems like he's the cooler parent in this one. I used to work at the West Coast Division store of Kroger. My family has several pets and farm animals, so I routinely shop at the local farm store, so the staff are familiar with me. Most of the time I did this after my shift ended, which means I'm in my work uniform, which is black slacks and a button-up gray shirt that has the store logos on them. The farm store personnel wear jeans, t-shirts, and a gold color vest with a farm store logo. So, there I was in the store looking at some electric fence supplies, and this woman kept pestering me and asking me questions about some jeans she wanted to try on from the other side of the store. I politely pointed in that direction of the clothing section, and she stomped off. A couple of minutes later, the same woman is demanding I unlock the changing room for her. I'm rather irritated with her aggressive Karen attitude, so I snapped, "No, I don't work here. Now go away and leave me alone." Again, the woman stomps off. I picked up a few items and start towards the checkout when I get ambushed by the same woman, who now has the store manager with her. The woman is demanding that I apologize to her And the manager just shakes his head and asks, "Would you like to apologize to this customer?" I tell him, "What for? She's rude, she's obnoxious and irritating as hell. No, I don't want to apologize." The woman hears that and she screams, "I have never been so humiliated in all my life. You need to fire him right now." At this point, the manager is still shaking his head in disbelief, and he says, "Well, Mom, I'm not able to do that." And she demands, "And why the hell not?" The manager tells her, "He doesn't work here." And she's standing there not able to comprehend. The store manager is just standing there staring at her, and I reply, "Obviously she's not smart enough to figure out that I don't work here, so save us both some time and fire me. Then maybe she'll shut up and go away." The manager then says to me, "You're fired," drawing in even more attention from the customers in the store. That's when I leaned in closer to the woman and say, "Are you happy now, ma'am? That's the third time he's fired me this week. Have a nice day. Thank you for shopping Smith's Food and Drug." I then walked away, and the manager hollers at me asking if he'll see me tomorrow, and I say, "Yep, I gotta get hay and alfalfa." Hearing that, the woman throws down the jeans she was holding and she runs out the doors. All I can say is OP didn't have to try hard to humiliate her, guys. It seems like the woman did just fine by herself. So, a little bit of backstory. My friend and I are extremely close, and we always go shopping when we can. It was after finals at school, and everybody else had plans. So we went to our town center by the school to eat lunch and shop, because teenage boredom. We went to the normal kinds of clothes shops, such as H&M, Dillard's, Macy's, etc., to look and try out clothes that we picked out for each other. We were walking around, and she saw something she liked in some clothing store that we've never been to. So we went in and started looking at stuff. That's when she noticed the bra section, and she starts looking through it, seeing if she could find something that fits. While we were looking around, a girl and her mom walk in, nothing special about them, so we paid them no mind. We kept looking around, and we kind of split up when the mother taps me on the shoulder, and she gives me the "come over here," so we can talk in private wave. She then says to me, "Excuse me, is that your girlfriend?" I told her, No, we're just really good friends." "Is there something wrong?" Karen then gestures to her daughter and says, "Well, you see, she's making my daughter feel very self-conscious." I then said, "Oh, did we say something inappropriate? I'm so sorry if we did. We'll make sure to watch what we're saying." At this, Karen says, No, it's nothing like that. It's just she's so big there. It's making my daughter think that she needs a boob job like her." Now, I'm thinking, excuse me. At this point, I'm already getting kind of mad since she assumed my friend got a boob job at the age of 17. But I let it slide since people do sometimes get the wrong impression. Karen then goes on and says, "I was just wondering if you guys could leave so my daughter could shop in peace." I tell her, "Okay, hold on. You want me and my friend to leave because my friend's chest is big? Are you serious?" Karen then says, "It's not that big of a deal. This store is not meant for people like her anyway. She needs to go to Hot Topic or something." Now, I'm basically about to lose it on this woman. I can handle a misjudged insult, But when you insult an entire person, that's when I get angry. So I tell the Karen, as far as we're concerned, this place is open to the public and we're allowed to shop here if we want. If your daughter can't deal with looking at my friend's figure, you need to reassure her that she's beautiful in her own way and to not worry about stuff like that. Not basically back her up that she should be self-conscious about herself. Now, I can then see the Karen getting frustrated at the fact that I'm making good arguments. At this point, we're starting to cause a ruckus in the store, and the manager comes over and says, "Is there a problem here?" Karen then says, "Yes, this churdal," pointing to my friend. It is making my daughter feel so self-conscious about her body, and she refuses to leave. At this, the store manager says, "Mom, anyone is allowed to shop in our store, but now you two aren't." I was surprised at how quickly the manager kicked them out, but I wasn't complaining. She was escorted out, and she was calling me and my friend insults while on her way out, with her daughter not even saying a word. The manager then apologized and told us to take our time. Guys, honestly, I think if anybody was making the daughter feel self-conscious, it's Karen, the mom. 100%. Like, the fact that she even said that to the manager is enough to make her teenage daughter probably want to crawl into a hole and never come out. I mean, can you really blame her? I guess she was just trying to do what's best for her daughter, right? This happened just this morning. My day started off with me showing up to work, only to realize that today was my day off. So, with my day off, I decided to go and buy a turkey for Thanksgiving. I didn't go back home to change my clothes because the store was closer, so I went to the store in a typical office outfit, not thinking anything of it. There were plenty of turkeys, and I chose a nice big fat one, and I was salivating already. As I was about to put it into my cart, this older woman says, "I'll take that one," and reaches for it. Now, I thought that was some kind of joke she was making, like, "That's a nice turkey, I'll take it,"